hang tight. We're about ready to start.
All right, Rob, I'm ready on this side, so I'll join Clubhouse here in a minute.
Okay.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to the New Media Show. My name is Todd Cochran, and, of course, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Rob Greenlee. Rob, how you doing?
I'm doing terrific, Todd. It's great to be back here doing the show on Saturday and also being live on Clubhouse as well. It's great to have everybody jump into the room today. It's always great to have everybody in the room. We're doing this as part of Club Pod, and I want to thank and say some appreciation out to Steve Olsher, who started that club and has built such a large and vibrant community. And definitely go check out Podcast Magazine and subscribe to it on his website. And let's get the show going, Todd.
So just so everybody knows, I know we've had some feedback on the audio, and I did find one setting in the TriCaster where there was an auto gain setting happening in the TriCaster. So audio on the live stream should be much, much better today. Love to hear your feedback if you hear any, what sounds like maybe overmodulation or anything like that. So we've done our best on our side to get things dialed in. And then, of course, we're at our guest mercy when they come on Clubhouse, depending on what type of audio interface they have. But anyway, Rob, we've had a busy week. I've had a busy week.
Yes, it has been a busy week with some big announcements. I know we've been teasing about this announcement for, I don't know, a couple months now on this show, and everybody's like, oh, finally. Finally, we're able to talk about Samsung joining the podcasting industry and, putting out an app for their Galaxy devices. So it's an exciting week to have those guys join the party just purely from the perspective of getting Android more involved.
Yeah, and I was surprised that in the announcement, of course, I saw the announcement a couple of weeks ago as we signed off on the PR campaign, was that just you, Libsyn and Blueberry were the only two podcast hosts that were launch partners with them. So I think what we're already going to see and what I've already saw is a number of podcasts. Well, here's another thing too, is the launch is, how do I want to describe it? Paced. I guess that's the best word to say. It's a paced launch. It's not like, 50,000 people can go over there and apply to be part of the Samsung platform. And we're doing just as you guys are doing, Rob. We're having people, we had an initial 100 or so shows that we sent over, and then they are now going to basically tell us when we can roll out to more podcasts. I think you guys are working under the same constraint.
Yeah. I mean, they want to walk before they run here with the infrastructure that they've built, which is all new. But they want to bring in podcasts, a little slower at the beginning. This is the same pattern that we saw with other launches. One good example is this is kind of how, to some degree, even Spotify launched slower than this. So if you for those that haven't been around the medium a long time, this is not an unusual launch. We saw a little bit of this happen with Pandora too. So there was just a ramp up on the technology side is what happened, and their comfortable processes on their end, making sure that things get handled properly without making mistakes. I mean, a large company like Samsung has processes that they have to go through to make sure that everybody's happy.
So, I did play around a little bit with the functionality, and we should mention that even though that this is a United States-based launch for Samsung, it is on a limited number of phones and tablets. It's typically the S20 series and above that the availability is, and it's actually Samsung. It's on the Samsung free app, and it's real simple to find it if you've got one of these types of phones and you've got Samsung free app installed. And for most folks, it's going to be the swipe to the right with your phone to basically bring Samsung free first and foremost if you're not using Bixby. And there's a listen button, and you'll see all the podcasts that are in the library currently on there. And I was actually the here's the interesting part, Rob. The podcast. So they've got some they're highlighting. Number one, they're highlighting is the Welcome to the Sarah Silverman podcast. Number two, CNN's Five Things for March. Number three, This American Life. Number four, Hidden Brain. And number five, Sorta in Scale Daily, which I was kind of surprised to see there.
Mm-hmm.
But the categories are broke down by comedy, news, society, business, arts, science and medicine, sports and recreation, tech, TV, health, education, religion, music, kids, games, and government. So really kind of the original, almost top level categories for that were similar to Apple Podcasts. And I here's what it kind of looks like. Of course, Rob, I don't know if you'll be able to see that. The folks
Yeah,
on
I can see it fine. It's just the Clubhouse folks can't see.
yeah,
it.
they can't see it, but
Hooked up the app on his phone.
and you can subscribe on the Samsung Free app. So that is something.
They did change the name from subscribe to follow. I don't know if they're going to or not. That hasn't been communicated that they're going to make that change. But they did say also that it's Samsung Podcasts is what they're called.
Yeah.
So so that listen thing is not necessarily the name of it.
Yeah. It says listen is the name of the app. Or listen is the tab, excuse me. Listen is the tab under the Samsung Free app, and then it says Samsung Podcast right next to it.
Yeah. So
but
as you refer to this, that's the name that you would use. So
yeah, it's actually called Free, and when the app loads, it's called Free. It's a Samsung Free app. And preloaded, they did an update to that app. I actually saw the notification come in the morning of the launch.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think I had an interview on this yesterday. And I think what we've got, Rob, is it's truly, now if you think about what has happened here, Apple can be considered an OEM, original equipment manufacturer.
Right.
So Apple launched a number of years ago and put the podcast app as a default load when you bought the phone. You didn't have to go get another. For a while you did, but then they loaded it by default. Now, every new Samsung phone with the will be preloaded with the Samsung Free app with every phone. So they're truly the second OEM that have made podcasting native to their device. And some will say, well, Google did. Well, Google, when you buy an Android phone from, let's say you buy a LG or some third-party phone, and you get a certain number of Google apps, you do not get Google Podcast by default. Right.
It's not the same kind of thing. Plus, also, we have to keep in mind, too, is older Samsung devices don't automatically get this either. And that's the thing about Android that's quite different, is that not all of the phones get updated like is generally the case with Apple. Apple does cut off after a while, but most phones get updated, right? That's just not the case with the Samsung or Android just in general. So this is going to roll out from here forward, and it is going to be on the Galaxy Note 10 series as well. So those are.
Okay. So I missed that one.
Right. It's got the Galaxy S10 and the Galaxy Note 10 also.
So this to me is really big. Now we can't talk, and I have. Both Rob and I are still under NDA, and we kind of know maybe what Samsung's doing in the future. But I think this is just their start. I would just say that.
Yeah.
And they've got a pretty big team that's focused on this. We met with them a number of times, and I'll just say for the record, we did, at least Blueberry did, encourage them to have the ability to more quickly onboard podcast and make it, I guess for a better word, a little less cumbersome, because when you do go to apply and when you do get your invite to come in and apply for Samsung Podcast, there is several steps that you have to take. Primarily, you have to set up a Samsung account
Right.
and create an organization over there. Now, it's not too bad, 4 or 5 steps in a PDF to get your account set up. You'll actually end up with a Samsung email. You'll have,
in the long run that you have that. So
yeah, it's better that you own that yourself. So whatever data, and this is what we're telling podcasters, is it's just like Apple Podcasts. You have to own your login at Apple Podcasts. You need to own your login at Google Podcasts, Spotify, and so forth. Many of you that are on some certain hosting platforms do not own your Apple Podcast listing. So because your hosting provider submitted your show for you and basically stole your IP.
well, it blocked your access to deeper metrics that would be available off of that particular listening platform. And more and more of these big platforms are giving access to deeper data off of those specific platforms. Right.
Absolutely. So, if some of you are wondering, I'm talking through Rob's account. I'm muted up on the stage on Clubhouse just because of the way we've got this thing wired in. But for those of you that join us on Facebook and YouTube and Twitch and Twitter today, make sure you say hello. We want you to check in. I want to thank Matt, Stephanie, and Mike, and a number of others that are live with us now on the live video stream. If you're on Clubhouse and you do want to see how we do this live, you can go to newmediashow.com/live. Give you a chance to subscribe to the show while you're over there, or subscribe and follow.
Right.
But I think this move by Samsung it's major. It's a major. You think about the worldwide reach they have when they expand this beyond the United States. They have a huge global market share. Huge.
Mm-hmm. Well, you just think about the reality of Android. On a global scale, they're 80% of the mobile phone market. So just think about the growth opportunity that may be ahead for podcasting on the listener side. Outside of the U.S. primarily. So Apple's got a stronger market share in the U.S. than they do outside of the U.S. So you start thinking about the international aspect of this, and that's why Todd and I are so excited about it, because outside of the U.S. is where that's where we're going to see the most growth as you look to the future.
But Rob, we also have to acknowledge that because this is limited to the newer phones and some of the higher end phones,
it's going to be slow.
It's going to be slow. And so for the United States market makes sense the most because from an economic standpoint, people in the United States, Japan, Korea, can afford to buy an S20 or an S21. Mm-hmm. And more, I guess, less economical, stable countries probably will not. They'll still going to be buying Samsung phones, but they're going to be lower models. But what I would expect is over the next couple of years, this will ramp up quite a bit because I cannot foresee them not releasing the Samsung Free app in some form or another to everyone on every new phone going forward. So that will help grow the Android penetration. And I'll say this again for all of you that are listening right now, and I'm just going to be rude. Many of you are doing a bad job promoting Android. I listen to over 100 new shows every 2 weeks, and about 90% of you never mention Android. You may mention Spotify, which is available on both Android and Apple, but you don't specifically talk about Android devices and Google Podcasts and all the other apps that are available for Android, and it really irritates me. Blueberry, we've been really, really focused to make sure our podcasters know Android is a viable platform, and that's why our penetration on Android is very, very high, because we've supported easy subscribability to podcasts in Android for a number of years, probably more than 6 or 7 at this point. But again and again, it's podcasters are getting better, Rob. But it's always hey, listen on Apple Podcasts, listen on listen on Spotify, and that's it.
Yeah,
I don't use Spotify, and a lot of people don't. So from an Android user, how do I listen to you? Or if I found you, maybe they're not listening, so they don't know they're missing those people.
Yeah, I think Todd, that issue is going to be, it's going to change, and I think
Yeah.
it's going to go away. I mean, I think Samsung getting involved in this, uh, in Google, I think over time this issue is going to go away. But there has been, I mean, you look at the history of the podcasting medium, it's been heavily weighted towards Apple devices. I mean, that's the honest truth. I mean, that's where it started. That's where the strongest consumption is. If you look at the listening platforms, I mean, like you're probably showing the same thing that Libsyn is. I mean, we're showing about 59-60% of all downloads coming through the Apple ecosystem, which is iOS only. So, I mean, it's not surprising that we see podcasters promoting primarily iOS, but yeah, I mean, as you look to the future, I think we need to open our minds a little bit to expand our efforts to promote listeners over on that side, because that's probably where the growth is going to come from.
Now, I will say that February, matter of fact, I ran the report yesterday for a client.
Yeah.
February numbers. Now, if we include Overcast and all the other Apple-related podcast apps, we're at that 58 mark itself. But Apple Podcast by itself last month went 49% at Blueberry. We're Apple Core Media, so that includes some other apps too. So we were at 49% Apple penetration last month, but with Pocket Cast and Overcast and all the other third-party apps would have got us to 58, 59% Apple ecosystem market share. But this is the first time Apple Podcast directly has been below 50% ever for us.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. They've been on the teetering on the edge because, again, it depends on how you look at this. If you're looking at this as purely for Apple Podcast, but still 50% of the market. And Spotify is like 7%, 8% for us. And that's 85,000 shows. That's a global look at 85,000 shows. So,
yeah. Well, and this ultimately will splinter the overall audience too. But in some ways,
additive.
Yeah, it's going to be additive. I would think, especially if you look outside of the U.S. So yeah, so it's an exciting time. We're both excited about Samsung joining the podcasting medium, and we're going to be supporting them and helping them in all the ways we can, and helping podcasters get in there too as this rolls out. And there is a form that you can fill out and apply. I believe, Todd, you have one as well.
Yeah, we have one, and you can go to blueberry.com, and the link basically is in our blog. If you go to podcastinsider.com, which just basically redirects to a Blueberry blog page, you'll find the link to the application. Same thing on Libsyn. You guys put it on your blog.
Right. So what we could do at this point, Todd, is we could open it up to the Clubhouse audience here. And if they had any questions about the Samsung launch or whatever, we can pull them up on stage. So if anybody listening here on Clubhouse would like to come up on stage and ask a question or make a comment about it, just raise your hand and we'd be happy to pull you up on stage. So does anybody want to take the invite? So we'll wait for a second here. But,
yes. And, I think overall, though, if we look at where this is taking the space, then, we can count on a couple of hands, maybe one hand, all the major mobile players that are left, that maybe this is going to push them into natively supporting. And again, I'm using the word natively. Being that when they buy the phone, there's podcast support built into the phone, one form or another.
Yeah.
Not have to go download another app.
Yeah, I think some people, though, in the past have not really used the Samsung apps. So I think that's why it's going to be important probably for podcasters to promote that listening platform, so people don't,
The user experience is great. It's just like any podcast app.
exactly. Oh, looks like Meg has stepped up. I think she's coming up on stage in a second here, I think.
Matt asked in the chat room, he says, is mentioning Google Podcast enough to cover Android? Well, maybe, but again, I think it depends on the makeup of your audience. I'm very big on promoting lots of different venues to get the podcast. Again, we don't care how they listen, long as they listen, right? We don't care how they get there, but we want to give Android folks, especially a few more options.
Right.
And talk about apps and talk about Google Podcasts. But, if at least you talk at a minimum Google Podcast, you're good. So go ahead, Meg.
Yeah, Meg, thanks for stepping up. Meg Glessener, thanks for joining us. Do you have a question or a comment or thoughts on the Samsung launch?
Hey, yes, absolutely. As usual, you two are always so informative. And for those who don't watch their show, I love popping in on your live on Facebook and all the places you two both do such a great job and are so informative. So thank you for that. I was just looking up the link that you shared. I was wondering if you could share those links again. I think you said Podcast Insider something or other. And I guess my question was, to your point, Todd, you were saying in general, podcasters, we do a terrible job of just thinking about the rest of the world, right? The Android users. How can we do better? And I hope my question isn't too simple, but I'm trying to learn from what you're saying, and I think it would be helpful for other podcasters in the room if you could help break it down for us to be more thoughtful and help others prepare. Thank you.
Yeah. So I guess I'll take the first part of this, and maybe Rob will have points too. So podcastinsider.com redirects to the Blueberry blog, and you'll see a second or third post in the stack will have a Samsung announcement with the link. And then on Libsyn, and Rob, what is your guys' Libsyn? Is it blog.libsyn.com, or where's your guys' blog at?
Yeah, well, it's blog.libsyn.com, and there is a post in the blog. At the bottom of the post, there's some links to get more information about it. Rob and Elsie did a segment on the Feed podcast talking about it as well, and the link is in there to the form to actually apply to be a part of it.
So, Meg, on the other half of your question there, it really is multifold. Announcing it in your show is always important, but where do you, how I go about it and how I've always went about it is I always tell my audience when I'm doing a live show, come to my website to follow or subscribe on the platform of your choice. So so if someone catches the show wherever and they're listening and they're not yet followed or subscribed, I tell them go to Geek, for our example, this show, go to newmediashow.com. The right-hand column above the fold is the places to subscribe to the podcast, or follow the podcast. I guess that's a new term we're supposed to be using. But oftentimes I go to first of all I listen to the show, and if they never mention it, then I go back to their website, and half the time I can't even find any subscription links on podcasters' websites above the fold. To be able to, someone that happens to discover your show via an episode title, or we've talked about this a lot in the show recently about SEO, but if they land on your website, and this is why it's important to have a website, because just Google is the number one discovery method of podcasts today. When they land on your website, they should have the ability to immediately subscribe to your podcast. Now, I blog, and I'm also a podcaster, so on between New Media Show and Geek News Central, my two primary shows that I do, there's over 15,000 posts on Geek News Central, and only 1,516 of them are episodes. So that gives 13,500 other opportunities when someone finds me an article via search that they can subscribe. And if you give them the option to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcast. We have something called Subscribe on Android that Blueberry's offered our podcasters for years. And then tune in wherever else you want to offer. You got to, it's a multi-pronged approach. It's just not good enough to say it in your show. You got to have an opportunity for people that find you without hearing your show to subscribe. And you get one chance when people land on your website. You look at your Google Analytics, and what will happen is if you look at people will stay 1-2 seconds on your site and they're gone. They're not digging in. Some of them will. A small percentage are going to dig in. But if they found you via search, you got a very short amount of time to convert someone. And half people are putting up these annoying pop-ups. Sign up for my newsletter when I don't even know who you are yet. So, just give people an opportunity to subscribe wherever they can. And I think your website, your show is 2 primary places to promote it. And Rob, I don't know, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is something that's going to evolve over time, and I think one of the limitations is that oftentimes these platforms are only available on devices that the podcaster doesn't have access to. So you have that challenge as well. And as this platform rolls out, I believe Samsung is going to be putting up more pieces to this off of the web, so people can link to areas. If you go to the Samsung.com website right now, you can see some information about the podcasting area. So there's not a lot that you can do right now unless you can get links directly off of the app. So if you're on, the iPhone or something like that, it may be a little hard for you to get links or get that kind of stuff. So you're going to have to get into the system and eventually be able to get that stuff. So this is going to roll out over time. It's not going to be something that you can do right away, but Todd and I are just trying to emphasize the fact that these are kind of where the growth opportunities are going to come as you look forward into the future. And as this platform rolls out, there's going to be greater and greater capabilities to engage with it, and it's just something to look forward to doing, is what I would say as well.
In February, we had client tracking.
Mm-hmm.
Over 134 different clients access podcasts. Now, I think of our sample, I think I had a few of them that had like 17 downloads. So that's, that was like a 0.000042, market share. But there was 134 different devices, apps, television, smart home devices, runs a gambit. However you can consume or watch media, Roku, run the full gambit. So I'm just telling podcasters, if you think Spotify is like the end for all, you're selling you're not giving your show the growth opportunities that it truly deserves. You don't have to be annoying about it in your show. Oh, you can subscribe to Spotify, TuneIn, Amazon Music. Tell them where to go find that information, and those that are listening will, and then those that discover you natively via Google search or however, I push them back to Moonbase Alpha. I'm pushing back to my website.
Yeah. So
Todd, a quick follow-up question. So I'm looking at the newmediashow.com website now.
Yep.
What are you, and Rob as well, what are you changing because of Samsung? I don't see the word Samsung there. I see Android, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, more subscribe options. Is it under more subscribe options, or what are you changing in any of your platforms to make it more Samsung friendly? Thank you.
When Samsung starts creating links and has a way for us to easily pull those, there will be some opportunity. But again,
this is at the beginning.
This is the beginning. And the main point is we know that it's early days for Samsung, and all those cool functionalities like how you link to Spotify and how you link to Amazon podcasts and that stuff is really not in place yet, and that will come with time. But our main point here is just don't forget about the Android users.
Great. Thank you two so much. I'm going to move myself back to the audience. Always love hearing from you both.
All right. Well, thank you, Meg. Thanks for stepping up and joining us and asking a question. You're welcome back up anytime. Just raise your hand. So, Todd, I also wanted to talk about a couple other topics too. I think that there was some information that came out here this past week about the difference in podcast genres that men and women listen to. Kind of a breakout. Did you see that in Pod News?
I did. I didn't dig into deep in the dirt on that at all. So go ahead and give me the 411 here.
Well, I think a lot of it falls along what people might expect. The differences, like a genre, kids and family, right? 77% women tend to listen to that. 23% men. So there's a quarter of men that listen to kids and family podcasts, which is good. And health and fitness, is it 63% women, 37% men. So I guess men are a little less focused on health and fitness. Maybe that explains some things, but it's interesting how the differences between genres, and I guess it's not a surprise. I mean, some of these areas, right? Technology is 80-20 with men. Sports is 80-20 with men. So you can kind of see, I guess a lot of this kind of follows what you would expect, right? News is 62%, 38% women. So you can kind of see, and it's a little helpful as you think about your podcasting efforts, to think about your genre and your topic area and how that applies to who the potential demographic market is for your show. So I think that's where this is helpful. Any thoughts on that, just generally, Todd?
Well, I think it makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
because we already know, like, true crime is just rocking it with the ladies.
Right.
Just certain certain topics of content are just, my show, even though I do a tech show, probably like 20 or 25% of my audience is ladies. It more appeals to the guys.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think it makes sense that they migrate to a certain type of content.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that the music one I thought was a little bit surprising. Men were a little, excuse me, I'm losing my voice, were 53%. Women were 48%. I would think that'd be a little more equal, but I guess it's not that far off. Um, Fiction, what's fascinating about that is that's 50-50. That's the only category that's split exactly down the middle, fiction podcasts. So I think we're going to see fiction podcasts grow and become more important here over the next couple of years as well. You have companies like Q Code. Steve Wilson is working for them. He's former Apple. At some point, I'll get Steve on this show, and he can talk to us about the fiction category too. So I thought that was interesting. Anything else that came up for you, Todd, this week? And I mean, if not, we can open it up to the Clubhouse
Yeah,
community.
go ahead. You go ahead and open it up.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you had a question or a comment about the podcasting space in general, or things that happened in the news this past week that you saw that you want to share with us or ask a question about, feel free to raise your hand and come up to the stage and join us on the live stream of the new media show. It'd be great to have you up here with us. So, I'm trying to think here, Todd.
Yeah, I'm preoccupied here as
Dr. Vibe is gonna join us here.
All
Looks
right.
like. So, all right, I think he's up here. Dr. Vibe.
Hey, Rob. Hey, Todd. How we doing?
Good. Thank you for stepping up. Just want to let you know we are recording this and live streaming it, so you're going to be heard outside of Clubhouse. So,
well,
go ahead.
You mean there's a world outside of Clubhouse?
Yeah, I think many you're right.
I probably came in a little bit late, but I wanted to, and I don't want you to have to record the whole thing or talk about the whole thing again. The whole thing about the Samsung piece. I came in a little late, so I caught the tail end of it, and I don't want you to have to repeat it too much. But high level, what is the whole thing about Samsung podcasting that's going on?
They've added podcasting support in their Samsung free app. It's under the Listen tab.
Right.
They did do a minimal launch with two primary podcast launch partners. That would be Blueberry and Libsyn were launch partners, and they did limit us to the number of shows that would be able to be submitted in the first round. Both Libsyn and Blueberry have applications via our website information if you're customers with us to be able to apply, and then we will be introducing or inviting podcasters probably as they apply to be able to be as Samsung allows us to submit more shows, get the information on how to submit your podcast. It's only available on S20, S21, and the Note S10 platforms. There's a list of devices that Samsung Free is on, so it's mostly new devices. So that's kind of the Reader's Digest version of what they've done there.
Yeah, and they're rolling out the category slow, or not category, but the number of shows that they're having on the platform. So you have to go to a form and fill out to submit your show to the platforms, and Todd and I's companies have forms that you can fill out off our blogs. So you can apply to get into the platform. And I think as the platform rolls out, you're going to see greater and greater capabilities, kind of more in line with what you see from some of the other bigger technology players in the space. So Todd and I are very bullish about Samsung's entry here and the potential impact over the next couple of years on the podcasting medium to grow on the Android side. So we're very optimistic about that.
Great. Thanks for the share. Rob, you had mentioned just a few moments ago you see a big growth opportunity in fiction. Why do you say that?
Well, I think it caters to, like we just saw in some research, it caters to both male and female listeners. And there's a fair amount of investment going on right now in Hollywood around this area. So I think that you're going to see more projects get created around kind of audio dramas of sorts is what these are. So if you think about like a TV show, that's kind of what these things are going to be, like a fictional TV show. So that's where kind of like the next evolution. I know that companies like Wondery have been playing around with fiction a little bit, but that's not really their sweet spot. Their sweet spot has been more true crime and reality-based storytelling. So you have like companies like Q-Code that are starting to get traction. They're starting to get some recognition of being very high-quality productions. So these are, podcasts are going to have heavy investment. So there is going to be heavy expectation for monetization around these things too. So that's the other trade-off with this as well. But it's just, it's about quality. It's about expanding on a genre that I believe has been kind of waiting in the wings for many years. Todd, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it's, I think over the last 5 years, we've seen a huge increase in this. So I'm not surprised. It's just a genre that has come of age.
Right. It's time. I think that the distribution opportunity, I think Hollywood has embraced the podcasting medium. There's a lot of stories, and this is also something too that's part of this. There's a lot of stories that are written in Hollywood and pitched to studios that don't get produced, right? So you have this pool of content that's being produced down there that doesn't find traction. And one of the reasons that they don't find traction is that there's no proving ground for the stories. So you see these being done as a way to trial balloon a particular genre or story, and to see if it's successful. And if it is a success, not unlike what we've seen with the Wondery company, is that it could potentially get produced into other products or other content like a video series for like Netflix or Amazon Prime or those. So it's kind of it's just an opportunity.
Can I ask one more?
Sure, go ahead.
No problem. Where do both of you have, and I say this respectfully, been around for a bit?
Yeah.
Where do you see the best growth opportunities for independent podcasters? Because you spent the last few moments talking about big production studios, etc.
Right.
Because many podcasters that come to me say, like, is there any room for me? Can I grow? Because all these big companies are getting involved in it, and I've been doing it for a while.
Right.
and they come to me and say, like, where's an opportunity? Like, where can I make traction with all these bigger players being involved in the game these days?
It's a fair question. I think that there's room for everybody in this medium. Big companies, big productions have been around podcasting for a long time, and I don't believe that it's limited the potential success of the indie side. The indie side, and Todd will confirm this, is the bulk of the podcasting community today. Most of what we talk about with like these fictional or Wondery, they're fairly small pieces of the podcasting industry when you really total it all up. But Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, the indie space is still, 95, 96% of the entire podcasting space. And really what it boils down to be kind of frank on independent content, I don't think a podcaster should be searching for a genre or a topic. I think a podcaster needs to make sure that they are this is the topic that they're excited about, that they want to, that they can sustain. The biggest problem is most podcasters think up the show idea and they can't sustain it for 2 years. Some of them can't even sustain it for 7 episodes. So pick the topic that you're the most passionate about and go after that and create sustained superior content on a weekly basis, and do everything you can do to become a thought leader. Really, podcasters are oftentimes, Rob was in radio a little bit before he became a podcaster, but I was a guy in the Navy who did a blog. So I had zero media experience whatsoever. So it took me to get to episode 50 before I even found my voice in my show. I didn't do I was doing a solo show. I didn't do an interview show until like 500 or 600 episodes in, when Rob and I started doing this show together. And it really wasn't an interview show. It was just him and I, John, and every once in a while we'd have someone. So pick the content that you are the most passionate about for building your content, or building your business, or your consulting, or it's really truly building authority, building superior content, and then everything else that goes in growing a show. Often in the early days, and I don't want to do this to brag, but I'm just going to tell you, this is work. It's grind. Yeah, I think I was spending 40 hours a week building my show in the early days before I started the business. Then it kind of got split. I was doing 10 a week on the show and 30 on the business, and sometimes 50 on the business. But it was additional content on the website. It was, there was no we didn't have Facebook, Twitter, or anything else at that time. There was none of these social platforms to promote. So you had to go where your audience was. And I think that's what a lot of podcasters fail to do, is they want to hang out with podcasters. You shouldn't be hanging out with podcasters when you're promoting your show. You need to be hanging out where your audience is, and building authority in those communities, wherever that may be. If that's on Instagram, if that's on Twitter, if that's on Facebook, if that's, you need to go where your audience is. Right. And don't go in there and be obnoxious and say, I got a podcast. But if someone's talking about a topic and something you've covered in your show, then give them the time hack in the episode. It's a big strategy. It's a lot of work to build a podcast, but you can't just record. That doesn't cut it.
Right.
To build.
And that's what these larger companies do as well. They put together a plan and push it out and build awareness around it. And Todd and I, this is where Todd and I came from. I mean, we each created our own shows and started from scratch and built them up over long periods of time, and just consistent effort. And it's not easy. And it's not easy for anybody in the podcasting space, but it's also very, very rewarding, and it builds over time. The benefits from podcasting comes from consistent, longer-term effort to build your brand, build your relationship with your niche and your audience, and being seen as a leader. And I think at the end of the day, and I'm a big proponent of this too, is that if you're in a genre, you need to be seen as a leader in that genre, and a thought leader, and inspiring people to be a part of your community and to participate with you. And establish pathways for your audience to connect with you, and I think you'll grow your show. I mean, I've seen it happen over and over and over again.
One of the things I did, and it's well known by people that have listened to this show for years, but maybe this isn't known in Clubhouse. I started out doing a tech show. And 1 year into doing that tech show, where was the tech stuff? Well, it was at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. So me and another guy that was doing a tech show, we went to Vegas, walked around with microphones. And what we learned from that was we came back with 40 or 50 interviews of stuff that we could publish. We didn't put it out as a normal podcast. We put it out as additional in a separate feed. We put it out as special content. But what it gave us access to was new audience and new contacts and new people. And the second year we went to, or maybe not the second year we went to CES, but very shortly after there, we walked into the 20 by 20 GoPro booth on their first time they ever exhibited at CES, and we were one of 3 media outlets because we were media according to CES. I gave an interview to the GoPro CEO. When we published that up there, we gave them great exposure. And guess what? Now I go into the GoPro booth when I go to CES and I get invited into VIP because I recognize where they were going when they first launched their product line. So it's those types of kind of connections you build by going to events and going where your show is being built that will now imagine GoPro linking back to your website and say, hey, here's an interview from our CEO. Think about the Google value and that alone. So just doing a show, if you're trying to grow, there's more you got to do. TV, you got to do radio. And by saying doing TV, you get to episode 50, call your local television station. Hey, I'm hitting episode 50. You want to do a feature on me? And sometimes people are looking for 3 minutes of content. You just got to think of any way to get some exposure beyond your circle and rinse, repeat.
Right. Dr. Vibe, why don't you tell us a little bit about your show? I know you do a show called the Dr. Vibe Show. So is that out as a podcast?
It's hosted by your company, and it's always been hosted by your company.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
I've been doing that. I've done over 2,000 episodes.
Wow.
And I have a number of different shows. I do the Dr. Vibe Show. I host the only online show in the world that's hosted for fathers and men that's sponsored by Dove Men Care. I also do another show called Dad's Talking, which is one-on-one conversations with fathers. Actually, there's a gentleman in the room, Joshua. He was one of my recent guests. And all that stuff is hosted. Sorry, Todd, by Lipson.
Oh, it's fine. We'll leave the lights on for you.
Yeah, thank you. So just been doing it for many years, and actually won 2 Canadian Ethnic Media Association awards through the podcasting. So I really agree with you that, and both you are dropping knowledge bombs as usual, that you got to put yourself out there. Like through my podcast, I've been interviewed by 2-3 different television networks in Canada in the last 2 years. Well, not actually in the last year, but I think also for podcasters, taking advantage of the pandemic is a golden opportunity because people you may not have been able to get a hold of, they're not doing as much.
Right. Or they're doing more online that you can connect with them, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, and don't be afraid to ask. I think a lot of podcasters don't be afraid to ask the guests, and also get those testimonials, especially video testimonials are very powerful.
Yeah, agreed. So you're a happy podcaster that's been growing your show. Is there any issues that you're seeing with the growth of your show that maybe we can give you some ideas on? Or are you doing okay?
I think I'm at the point now is I have to get a team, because doing it on my own is a little bit challenging. So one of the things I've been blessed with, and I share with a lot of people out there, I'm now getting co-op students in media programs to help me out.
Oh, okay.
So that's been very helpful, especially, as we all know, editing takes a whole pile of time.
Yeah.
So I looked a few months ago and I said, where are 3 areas that I would like to offload? Because when I want to offload stuff, I want to make sure if I'm offloading it, it's either getting my time back or creating revenue.
Right. And here's something you're going to probably cringe at. I've never edited, ever. If I had to edit, I would
And
no longer be a podcaster.
leave the room.
And that's just that's a personal choice I made. I invested in equipment, I invested in audio quality, so that I would get the best quality out the door. I cut the ends. I do a little thing with Ophonic, and it gets published. That's it. We leave in the hms, haws, coughs, sneezes. But again, I know that not everyone could live with themselves if they did that. But
Right. Okay.
Well,
But
Dr.
no,
Vibe, thanks. Oh,
Yeah, I won't take up too much. I'll come back in another episode and ask you some more questions, but I don't want to hog the room, so I'm going to put myself back in the audience.
all right. Well, thank you, Dr. Vibe. We appreciate you joining us up here. We do have another person up on stage that we wanted to bring into the show, Andrew Kokowitz, I think. Or did I slaughter that, Andrew?
Oh, it's okay, Rob. It's Kuklowitz.
Kuklowitz. Okay. Awesome.
I should put a pronouncer in my Twitter bio or something. It's such a common thing.
It's okay. So you're CTO at PRX. Awesome.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen you guys, and we don't have any live events. I think probably around New York about a year ago since I saw you, Rob. But
Yeah.
Good to be on the show. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for stepping up. Do you have any comments or anything you wanted to throw out there about any of the topics we've talked about today?
Oh, I love what you guys are talking about. I love to hear your takes on it. Always so thoughtful and from such a great kind of two different perch of such great experience and platforms you guys work with. But I think a lot about Samsung, honestly.
Yeah.
If I might call back to that. And kind of excited about the fact that, yes, they're going to be in this new generation of phones with this default app, but they also have watches, they've got smart TVs. To me, the fact that another large manufacturer is seeing podcasting as table stakes for their devices.
Yep. And refrigerators too.
And refrigerators, right? Yeah, that's a good cross promotion. Yeah, listen to my show while you're checking the date on your milk.
Right.
But I think it's pretty exciting, and I tend to think about these things as always additive, but I think it's just signals to me yet another way that podcasting is recognized that just like you need to have a web browser in every device, you need to also have a podcast player on there. And I think that just is a great signal.
Yeah, I think we are in this age of audio like we've never been before. It's really exciting, and having all these big companies, embrace it. I know in the early days, Todd knows my background working at a small company called Microsoft, trying to build podcasting, and it's exciting to see it happen. At all these other tech companies that kind of shunned it in the past, right?
If you think about it, Rob, can you imagine in 2004? And I don't even know. Samsung had some product lines, and of course, there was no mobile phones yet. But let's move forward. Let's just think about a Samsung asking to have your content be put on their platform. It's the same thing with Microsoft in those early years. It was like before podcasting was sign some big contract, and if you were somebody, you could get on. And now what we've really done is. And I go back to it again and again and again. What we have in podcasting is incredibly special with open RSS and no gatekeepers. Now, there are rules on different platforms. If you're playing music on Spotify, your show's probably short-lived to be there. But, it's just this opportunity, unlike really anything else, except maybe YouTube, where you can have free reign to build a brand, build a show, change the idea, no rules. You don't have to worry about cussing. You can talk about adult content. You can, and it's largely carried on everything. I just think it's pretty remarkable what we have and what makes podcasting unique. And that no gatekeeper thing used to be a thing. I mean, a big thing. And most people now just, they have no idea, they didn't come into the media space having those constraints. But when I started my show, it was a blog. That's it. There was, there was no other place to promote. And that's why it was such a watershed moment in 2005 when Apple added podcasting to iTunes at the time and able to sync media and walk away with it. That was, we all take that for granted now. We walk away, we listen to music and podcast and watch YouTube on our mobile devices. That didn't exist. So it's evolved, and I think we just have to really appreciate the opportunities here these companies are giving us.
Yeah,
that's right on.
Yeah.
I just, if you don't mind me jumping in just to say, I think it is.
Go ahead, Andrew.
It is interesting, your point about gatekeepers, and there was a recent New York Times article talking about this, how so many other forms are having to kind of confront misinformation and kind of curating of their platforms and checking over their content. And podcasting largely hasn't done that, although there's been some examples over the years. But it is interesting. It will be interesting to watch, I think. As podcasting grows, this is a problem we're going to have to confront more. And I think Samsung now is in the position, even with just this first round, of deciding what shows are on their platform that aren't, and now became, in that process, a content gatekeeper and curator who's going to need to have standards, management of it, and also featuring, right? Like there's going to be, I'm sure, people that are going to have to figure out, who do I call if I want to get my show featured on Samsung?
I want to address that, and maybe that's a good topic, because the New York Times article was like, you mean Google's going to treat podcasting like search, and they're not going to remove content that is what could be considered hate speech, what could be considered borderline racist, So let's think about that for a second here, and how this is. Okay, I think we can all agree. Well, I'm not going to make you agree, but, Alex Jones, when he got kicked off Apple Podcast, that was Apple's choice because they didn't like it. What'd you say, Rob?
He got kicked off of all the podcasting platforms.
Right. But because Alex Jones had his own .com, he had his own RSS feed. I think he had to go find hosting somewhere on his own. But he was not able to be devoiced. Now, that pisses a lot of people off.
Right.
Because they want him devoiced, and they want him taken off the air, and they want his voice shuttered. But because he has a podcast feed, and because you can still manually subscribe to a show on any app, including Apple Podcast, which is funny, is you can still subscribe to Alex Jones on Apple Podcast. You don't know that, but you just have to manually add the feed. Right. He's still on the air. Now, it is what it is with that content. And then when you have white supremacists and other folks, I think we all can agree that there's no place for that content. But the internet is open. And now you're going to suffer the consequences if you put some site up, or you put some word out, or you say something, you're going to have the wrath of the world upon you. But the internet has really been one of these places that, unless you do something totally extreme, and your hosting provider kills you, or the FBI seizes your domain name or something, you can pretty much, and then you can pop back up. It's going to be an impossible thing to control, because you take a site down, delist them, guess what? They're 3 hours later, they're back online. That was, was obvious with torrent sites and stuff in the early days. So this content will not be mainstream, but the people that are still looking for that content are going to find it, sadly. And Google is, when Google starts non-indexing sites, we should all be very, very, very scared, regardless if you like the content or not.
Well, we do live in a country and in a constitution that supports free speech, but that free speech does come with consequences.
Right.
So it's, nowhere does it say in the Constitution that you're immune from consequences.
Right. And, and hate speech, believe it or not, has been ruled by the U.S. Supreme Court to be free speech. You can say hateful things all day long. Now, again, what you say can and will potentially come back, and, you can be sued and libel and talked about and on the news, and, so we may not.
It's worth remembering that those rights for free speech don't protect you
Right.
They don't assure you a corporate platform.
That's right.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's very true. Right.
But they may still afford you a website that we don't like, that has an RSS feed that can be subscribed to, and that message can still get out to those followers. And that's really that's pretty. Right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he said if you can find a host that will embrace
Stomach it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think these folks have been successful in doing that.
Right.
It's a wide world, right?
Yeah.
And there's countries that will have different laws and different support for things. So, but I think it is interesting, and I think we'll continue to see, just as we have, Zuckerberg and others on the Hill being asked these questions today. That's going to the big social media companies. I kind of love it to be the case where we have podcasting is such a big concern that we have similar questions. And I think that was sort of for podcast hosts. I think that was sort of what the New York Times article was getting at, was that actually this is a piece of that. And I think we do have a responsibility as an industry to really think about this and make sure we have policies and get ahead of this. I think like with a lot of things, I feel like this, people know I care a lot about privacy and podcasting and things. I think there's a lot of cases. Right. Yeah, for sure.
The Section 230 modifications that they're considering will have impacts on podcasting companies. If they make us liable for the content that's on our platforms, and we have to go through and basically, if we lose safe harbor, it's going to be incredibly damaging to the podcasting space, because unlike Twitter, Facebook, we're not doing editorial control on podcast. Now, if someone reports a podcast and says, hey, there's hate speech in there, we go and review it. And if it breaks our terms of service, we cancel their account. And sometimes people try to have content taken down that's not hate, but they just don't like the content. So there's a delta there. But if we get to the point where Section 230 makes us responsible for editorial content, then that's a very scary new development for podcasting. But that's what Facebook and Twitter has been doing. They've been silencing, and this is another thing that most people don't understand. You think everyone screams, and we've talked about this in the New Media Show before, everyone screams that conservative voices have been devoiced. Well, I hate to inform everyone, but extreme left content has been devoiced too on these platforms. I hear about as much devoicing of extreme left and extreme right groups as anyone else, and shadow banning, and it's just, and people say, oh, this doesn't go on, but believe me, it does. So it's not necessarily just conservative voices are being devoiced. It's also on the other side as well, but you just don't hear about it as much.
Well, and the safe harbor issue crosses into other areas too, around copyright violations as well. And we're seeing, and Todd, maybe you're seeing this too, but we're definitely seeing a ramp up of takedowns that are coming in the podcasting space around music. So
not just takedowns, but 6-figure lawsuits.
Right. Well, that all rides along with it, and that is the area where that provides most danger to that safe harbor provision. Is that grows and proliferates, that gives more ammunition for our legislatures, our government to crack down, right? As those lobbyists from the music industry or whatever pressure these platforms to limit and moderate and force licensing also. So that's the other part of this too that doesn't get talked about a lot.
And I think too the marginalized groups have, through podcasting, the ability to have a voice and not have it modified, not have the message edited. They can say it the way that they want to say it and raise up the issues they have. I go back to an event that happened that Rob and I were both at in Atlanta. It was DragonCon. And Rob, were you in that session with me?
Yeah, we're sitting right next to you.
We were sitting in the back of the room, keeping our mouths shut, and we heard these groups of people of color that talked about how the media had marginalized their message and not even talk to spokespeople in the group, and it just went on. And I was like, and why they're doing podcasts? Because they're pissed that their message was being modified, and they were able to say what they wanted to say in a podcast. And to me, that was like, thank God we have podcasting.
Right. There is a
Absolutely.
medium that's accessible to that community, right?
Absolutely.
I think the power of open podcasting is, and I think you guys have said this a few times, this show and probably every show, is just such a huge strength. And I think it's, music licensing is an interesting kind of lever on that, where you see platforms like Spotify who have obviously music licensing deals and then can create products like they're kind of mixed, kind of I forget the name of what they called it, but they have the ability for folks to kind of create a playlist, basically, almost like an old school DJ.
Right. Yeah, but that's only available on their platform, though. That's the difference.
Exactly.
Right.
Right. So there's this enticement to, if you want to have that show that's talking about today's hits or whatever, and you don't have the relationship or capability of getting that licensing, hey, here's a way to do it, right? But it's only on Spotify, and I worry about kind of levers like that and things that then keep podcasting from being available or keep a show from being able to be everywhere and open.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people working on the music thing. You go to podcastmusic.com. That team has probably spent the most amount of money and banged their head against concrete walls the hardest, because I know what they've done. I know what they've spent. They are working very hard to get licensing agreements so that you can have mainstream music as an intro, or you can play 45 seconds of it and legally talk about it and have it downloaded and have a license that is affordable. They've worked very hard at it, but I'm going to tell you, these labels, and then the OG's vast libraries of content, they're used to doing deals where hundreds of millions of dollars exchange hands. And when you get into a microtransaction where a podcaster is going to pay $20 to play 45 seconds of AC/DC, Thunder, whatever, that doesn't make them excited. And it's very, very difficult to get the licensing in place. But Napster ruined it for all of us.
Well, Todd, there are technology companies that are working on this problem.
Yeah.
And they are actively working on scanning podcasts to find content that's violating copyright. So, this is only going to ramp up and become more and more of an issue. And that's one of the things that we all need to be cognizant of. And that, we may see a time when there's more monitoring and enforcement of copyright in the podcasting space than we've had so far. So,
well, you don't want to be on the end of a subpoena like we were to turn over download numbers.
Right. But that's going to happen unless the industry is proactive about dealing with this issue, and instead of trying to deal with it from the perspective of being a pirate. So, and that's a difficult conversation to have with the industry too. So, because we've been used to just, letting people do whatever they want to do, so it's tough. But
I wouldn't be surprised if some podcast hosts start to introduce some kind of fingerprinting service to recognize and warn people. I mean, back before they were bought by Spotify, Echo Nest had a rather brilliant product and API for doing that. Right. It's fairly mature tech at this point, and probably wouldn't be impossible or even terribly difficult to add as a feature. But again, like in the interest of protecting people from themselves, or especially new podcasters who may not be aware of these hazards. And again, a new podcaster also is less likely to be subject to a lawsuit. But at the same time, it feels like something that might end up. I feel like a lot of these things we're talking about are sort of good problems.
Yeah.
They're problems that, because podcasting is getting attention and podcasting has only gotten bigger, audio is reigning supreme. Like, there's things we have to do to kind of help people to deal with that kind of brighter spotlight.
Right, and a lot of podcasters have kind of just gotten away with putting music in their podcasts for a long time because nobody was really looking at it that closely.
Yeah.
I'm just warning everybody that that's in the process of changing.
Last summer, there was a massive amount. I think we all saw it. There was about a 6 weeks period where we just got hammered.
Right.
And they went back and they were looking at content that was 10, 11, 12 years old and doing takedown notices on episodes that had been online like 12 years. So, what happens if someone gets a hair up their butt and decides that, okay, we know they've had this online for 10 years. Is this a money-making opportunity and fines? And do we go back after those folks? Those podcasters, some of them had long quit, but they were still paying their.
Now I got to go back and look at my Epidemic Sound contract and make sure I'm in compliance with all the not Lipson or Blueberry with you Tide, but
okay.
Spreaker. And the reason I use Spreaker is because sometimes since I've been home, is you hear the baby crying sometimes you hear the shower running. So, and I apologize, like, listen, I'm still home right now. So, but I am going to be moving back into a studio soon. So just wanted to know if you guys had any podcast that's hyperlocal that's really questioning in this space, is doing really major things in the space.
Well, I can certainly point you to a new network that's forming right now. It's called CityCast. I believe it's in 2 cities right now that's launching. I do believe as the number of listeners come into podcasting, as the medium grows, local will become more and more viable over time. Not unlike broadcast radio has been primarily a local medium, and as they grew their penetration or their listener base in any particular geographic location, they had a greater and greater opportunity, right? So it's the same type of situation, right? And as the medium grows, the opportunity for local podcasting just expands. I've been very pro local podcasting for many years now. It's been very slow to ramp up because the medium has tended to grow rather slowly, maybe 3 to 4% audience growth per year. So it's not like a hockey stick type of growth. So the opportunity for local podcasting has been a little bit more limited, and broadcast radio has kind of kept that foothold. But I think with the pandemic and the things that have happened around that, I think that local radio is a little bit kind of in flux right now. I think that there is an opportunity probably now going forward to step in and do more podcasting local as you look to the future. So I wish you luck on that. Definitely. And if you did a licensing deal with the Epidemic Sound folks, you're probably okay. So as long as you paid your license when you acquired the music and you put it in your podcast, you're good on the license. So,
Rob, just to let you know too, our live stream is having a little bit of a hiccup right now. I don't know if it was the transcoder on Wowza or what, but I'm restarting the transcoder. But we're down in some places live, but.
Okay. It's a bandwidth problem, probably.
Yeah. So something. Well, I did a speed test, and speed test is good, but there's something happening in the network. This is this has happened a while where we lost the live stream.
Yeah. Well, that's the dangers of doing what we're doing, going simulcasting across lots of stuff here. But I did notice that we have Mr. Tom Webster in the audience, and he wrote a very interesting article that he's been doing weekly about exclusive content, which I thought was very interesting, and the role of personality versus exclusive content and the importance of that. And I don't know, Tom, if you wanted to step up and talk about that or not. If you wanted to or not, you're certainly welcome to come up and talk about your article. But I thought it was an interesting article from the perspective of podcasting and how important personality is in the success of podcasting. But Todd, I don't, a lot of, like you look at like Joe Rogan, you look at a lot of the exclusive deal key to success in podcasting. I think that personality is the key to success in podcasting. I don't know what's your comment on that, Todd?
Well, I think we've said it 500 times on this show. People come to listen to us. They don't come to listen to our guest often enough. So personality is the key. It's very hard if you have a successful show to swap out hosts and continue that show to be successful. Some have done it, but not a lot.
Yeah, right. So, so that's why it's so important for you to be genuine on your show, and also just, apply your personality to whatever that you do in the podcast, and make that shine through. And I think you'll find that you'll connect more on an authentic way with your audience, that then will grow your show. It's those that are able to do that and be fun and be entertaining and talk about interesting things and get people engaged and involved in your podcast are the shows that typically succeed. I think that's a rule of thumb really for any content creator in the entertainment business, and that in a lot of ways that's what podcasting is. We're in the entertainment business, we're in the education business, so those are the two core components of the content side of podcasting.
Thank you. For me, you get me live every day. So, and people have said to me they love the way I do the show because it's music. I do horoscopes. I talk about crazy stuff too,
right.
But I also do some news. And then on Thursdays I interview people. So I've heard a great feedback about, oh my God, I can't start my morning without Good Morning Lynette. And so that makes me feel good to know that I'm on the right track. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, thank you, Audrey. Appreciate it. Good luck with your show. I hope it continues to grow as podcasting grows. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Rob, also this week, I don't know if we talked about it on the last show, but Brian came out with his podcast prefix explained in the Sounds Profitable newsletter. Did we talk about this on the last show? I can't remember if we did or didn't.
I don't think we went into any kind of detail on it. No.
Yeah, so for those of you that are out there that are using PodTrack, Chartable, PodSites, or even Blueberry's Redirect, there's a good article about podcast prefix and some explanation of what really happens from a technical standpoint. He did a pretty good job of breaking it down and explaining it. And how that works and what is available with that, what your stats providers get with that data using a redirect. And actually, this is a pretty good newsletter to be signed up to. If you're not signed up for the Pod newsletter, that's a good daily read. And then the Sounds Profitable newsletter comes out once a week. And of course, as Rob, you indicated, Tom Webster also has a newsletter every week. These are 3 must reads if you're trying to stay abreast of what's going on in the podcasting space, look at announcements, get some education. There's a few more out there, but I don't personally recommend them.
Yeah. No, I think it's, there's these little tips that you can pick up about what's going on at the cutting edge of the podcasting medium that can help you have a deeper understanding. And sometimes it helps you avoid things. But it also can open doors to opportunity if you understand some of these things. But we're certainly welcome to have any of you step up and join us up on stage if you have a question, if you're in Clubhouse. And
could be any question.
Right. We appreciate you being here and joining us and contributing to our live show. This show is streamed live on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube right now. So and it's going to be and video podcast.
So Rob, now everyone on the live stream was complaining that your audio is too low, so maybe I adjusted it too far down. It's not your fault. It's on my side, so don't worry.
Switched up a tiny bit.
Yeah.
So it looks like we had someone step up and join us. So I've invited this person to join us up on stage. So.
Hi, my name is Idra Flaxa, and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you for stepping up. Do you have a question or comment?
I do. One quick question, though, before I get to my podcast-related question. What are you all using to use your awesome microphones for Clubhouse?
Well, I'm using a Rodecaster Pro. So the audio from Clubhouse is being routed through my system here. Todd's doing all of the streaming out to YouTube and Facebook and Twitter Live, all on the live video side. and he's actually recording the whole show on his end. But I'm just the conduit to Clubhouse.
And Rob is connected to me via Skype. And
Skype.
so, if you want to see kind of what's happening on the live side, you can always go to newmediashow.com/live. But really, I think if you're looking to up your game in Clubhouse from an audio quality side, Shure has a mic that works perfectly with an iPhone right now. What is it? MK7. What is the model number of that? It's behind you on the wall back there.
Oh, it's the MV7.
NV7.
Yeah, it's the little child of the Shure SM7B that actually has the ability to plug into a USB connection. So you can use it in a much more versatile way. But I haven't incorporated it into my normal flow too much because I'm using the SM7B as my primary mic right now.
And that's the mic I'm using as well on my side. But my flow is because my studio is a little older, I'm actually going through a normal Mackie mixer. And then what we're doing with the live stream is going through a TriCaster, which, there's lots of free options now to live stream video. That is not in any way a free or cheap version. And then we're using Wowza as a way to multi-stream, which today we're having a little trouble going to about 7 different locations at once. It's called
So Todd, that TriCaster, I think a lot of people haven't heard of that. It's a studio in a box kind of concept. Most podcasters aren't using TriCasters anymore.
No, they can't. They can't. First of all, the price tag on it is like $25,000 is where the price tag starts, and so there's lots of OBS is the one a lot of podcasters are, and it's free. It's you can get it and you can integrate relatively inexpensively and use, sometimes you can use a cell phone, sometimes you can use just a cheap webcam, not a webcam or a prosumer camera. So lots of ways to do it these days. You don't have to spend all the money I did.
Well, I think a lot of people used it's a little video switcher called the ATEM.
Yeah, some use ATEM. Yeah,
right, and it's like $400 whatever, and you can have multi-camera kind of opportunities. So if you want to have more than one camera, video camera in your office, your home studio or whatever, you can do that. I thought about doing it too. I just have one video camera. I know Todd has like 3, right?
Well, I stay on primary, the number 2 shot, but I got 3 cameras, and then the TriCaster I have can actually handle 6 cameras and then a whole bunch of virtual inputs through a service called, or through a protocol called NDI. Matter of fact, I don't have any wires in the studio. Everything is done by LAN cables. And then from that, we have the ability, like I can bring a screen up on it. I can bring a screen up and actually show a screen, or I can show Rob. He's coming into me via Skype video, so I can put him up on this, the primary output. So again, what I did was, and the reason I built this studio the way I did was, when I started streaming more than 10 years ago, that was about the only way you could do it. And if I was to rebuild it today, no way would I spend that kind of money.
Right. And I'm using a teleprompter here too, so you can kind of see Todd there in a camera. If you're watching on the video side, you can see more. So those that are on Clubhouse can't see this, but I wanted to thank Tom Webster. He stepped up here and joined us up on stage. He's the senior VP of research at the Edison Company. So, Tom, thanks for stepping up. I really appreciated your article talking about exclusive content versus personality. I thought it was an interesting contrast.
Yeah, thanks, Rob and Todd. And I didn't pop on to talk about my article. I really just popped on to ask you guys a question.
Sure.
Is now that you have had a few weeks of incorporating Clubhouse into the New Media Show, has the show gotten better or worse? And no ulterior motive behind it. I have no presupposition one way or the other. I admire you both for trying.
Right.
Because I know you juggle a lot of things at once. You've got every stream up at once. You're on Facebook and YouTube and Friendster and Empire and you're on everything. And how is the show for you? And have you listened back to any shows? Do you think that this improves the show, or do you think you might go back to the way it was?
So today, everyone that's come up on Clubhouse has been pretty good from a audio standpoint, and it will produce pretty well. But we got our butt kicked for probably 3 or 4 episodes because I was dealing with a setting that